And by the way, I feel like that's more, I could be wrong, but more on the tech side and less on this sort of traditional organizations that have already been running this way. But business strategy has changed. Operational strategy has changed. So AI is coming in a big way. Organizations are actually literally looking at how do we eliminate jobs with AI? And I don't think it's like, how do we get rid of people? I literally think it's, how do we eliminate jobs? How do we eliminate process over process work, which usually is associated with people, using technology, using AI. So AI is really, increasing the speed of how work gets done in organizations.
Welcome to Leadership Rewired. Allison, Allen, and Dean Martin invite you to join them for an honest conversation that brings a personal perspective to the issues of leadership.
Welcome back to Leadership Rewired. This is the podcast. As you guys know, we've been doing it now for 26 episodes. We just cut through the noise. We get real about what's going on in the world. And I'm here with my co-host, Dean Martin, and I'm Allison Allen. And today we're going to be talking about what leaders need, the new leadership expectations for today, which, we talk about and have talked about this entire season, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper this time. So, Dean, let's just check in with each other. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm doing good, actually. It's a good day. Every day is a new opportunity to connect and make a difference in little ways, and to look after ourselves and to look after others. So, yeah, how are you doing, Allison?
I'm good. I'm wearing a really cool T-shirt. I don't know if you can actually see the words, but
currently only accepting good vibes and money. That's what Allison.
Yeah, well, it's Friday, and I feel like I've had a week. I've had meetings and clients and things happening this week, and so it's like it's a good day to record, and it's a good day to go into the weekend. And I am trying to live in this whole moment of like, we just need to be like welcoming good vibes in our lives, because there's so much noise that we need to bring good vibes in. So I love this T-shirt. It's from this company called Mess, MESS.
Okay.
They're not sponsoring it, but I saw someone else wearing it, and I just thought to myself, you know what? I have to have it. So it speaks to me.
That's very good.
All right. So should we dive in?
Yeah, please. Let's indeed.
Yeah.
So, as I was thinking about this, us coming to the end of our first podcast season, and what you've just said in the intro, where we are as leaders now is a unique position. I think, obviously every moment is unique, but I think they're higher stakes now for leaders. If you're doing something right, I think the benefits can be enormous. And I think if you're making a couple of errors or overlooking some things, I think the consequences can be catastrophic. So this is like, how has leadership actually changed? And I would encourage every leader who's listening here, you're obviously listening because you care about being a leader and you care about your people and the work that you do. So, I'm not going to label you a good leader, but you're here because, you give a shit. And there may still be some things that are going on that could, within your own leadership, that have elements of a 2019 style of leadership. So as Allison and I are chatting, let's see what emerges here. But maybe you'll listen and go, oh, there's still a little bit of how I'm leading that's kind of maybe old school, and I might need to change it a little bit. What do you see, Allison, as some of the reasons why, when we're talking about like, why have things changed? Like, what are some of the bigger moments that bring us to a unique position now, maybe in the 3-4 years?
I think we have to be honest with ourselves. We're not even going to look at the last 3 months. I think we have to be honest with ourselves about just the workplace in the last few years. The workplace has changed. Expectations on even going after talent has shifted. Leaders are, in essence, especially the ones that own the companies, they're digging down on what they're calling, principles. And I think there's just a lot of things happening in the world that have shifted from sort of a talent first mentality to really about organizational first. And one could argue the talent and organizational first is really together. It really
Right.
shouldn't have been one over the other. But I guess there is this perspective that we were so focused on talent that we weren't thinking about how to run our organizations. And now this is how we're running our organizations. And I
Right.
think
Yeah.
leaders, especially those that are in reporting to C-suite or in the middle, are having to be the ones that sort of like hold on a little bit to that talent first mentality while executing, as you just mentioned, against, immense demands, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to uh, make more money, expand faster, build better products faster.
Yeah.
There was some article out there where, a lot of organizations are even willing to lose on getting the best product out to just get the product out first. And so I just think the pressure on
Yeah.
leaders and teams is immense. And I think what used to be this sort of traditional, aspirational, motivational leadership, I think leaders are now just looking at how do they keep it all together
Right.
and how do they keep people moving toward the right, direction. So I
Right.
think,
Yeah.
the leader that today needs to be constantly thinking about prioritizing adaptability. You cannot almost you yourself as a leader can't think of things as stable.
Yeah.
And this is my 3-year plan for the next 3 years. I think you have to be thinking about how do I be more adaptable?
Right.
You as a leader are going to have to be constantly tapping into your empathy bucket. And by the way, you're going to be expected to innovate. That's
Yeah.
never going away, right?
Yeah.
And some of us are managing remote workforces, and some of us are in the office, and some of us are in hybrid.
Yeah.
And by the way, some of us are waiting for the executives to decide that all of that's changing. And now they need to move to something else. So just trying to keep up with the rapid pace of change
Yeah.
is really what this episode is about. And that is the new expectations of leaders going forward.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would add is, I think we were when we were working at Bloomberg together, we started talking a lot about change management. And that was like, what, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was always like when you are going through a change, it was almost like this thing that when change happens, here's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's flipped its script. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we don't have the 3-year plan now. We may have the 3-year plan, but we are constantly firing off and taking care of change. So does that make sense in the way we're talking about it?
It certainly does. What I'm hearing from you is, there's a shift and an increased expectation in how organizations run or are structured. And then from within, I think employees are also requiring or, demand something new. And I think that's great. I think COVID did a lot of that for us. So, it gave us some autonomy. Now when things are a little bit harder or bleaker, I think employees want work that is purpose-driven more so than ever. Not that we ever wanted to do mindless activities, but I think that's on the increase now. And also, as you and I have, we spend a fair amount of time on this podcast talking about well-being and mental health. I think that is something, whether as a leader we choose to address it directly or not, people are now conscious of it and are aware of it and saying, I don't want to work somewhere where I feel controlled, or I don't want to work somewhere where my manager just sees me as a means to an end and it's just all about execution and I'm kind of lost in the mix. So I think those expectations, I think a workforce is probably a little bit more vocal and expects more. And then that comes up against the organization saying, well, less of that, we're driving harder. And I think what we want to do is be able to how do we wrap these two things together so that as a leader, you can still lead with more empathy in a way that doesn't require you to lose momentum or productivity or speed or efficiency. Yeah.
I love what you just brought, how you brought that in. And I'd like to sort of like put it in compartments because
Sure, yeah, let's.
I think we just introduced a lot. So like if you think about strategy, right? There's three aspects of strategy. And I know there are lots of consulting groups who will debate this, but let's just oversimplify. So if we think that there's three aspects of strategy, the first, and think about it in sort of, almost like circles that sort of join at the center, which is, business. So if we think about what are the big changes in business right now, organizations are reframing how they want to get work done. So the war for talent is still real, but a lot of organizations are shifting from we're going to kill ourselves to get the best people in here, and we don't really, we're going to exit people whenever we want to, and we're going to pay people what we want to pay, and we're not going to we're only going to fight for the ones that are really considered top talent. Right. And oh, by the way, we want to produce products, services, and solutions faster. And we want to do it in a very lean way. So that there's sort of that sentiment in business strategy. And you can, and by the way, I feel like that's more, I could be wrong, but more on the tech side and less on this sort of traditional organizations that have already been running this way. But business strategy has changed. Operational strategy has changed. So AI is coming in a big way. Organizations are actually literally looking at how do we eliminate jobs with AI? And I don't think it's like, how do we get rid of people? I literally think it's how do we eliminate jobs? How do we eliminate over process work, which usually is associated with people, using technology, using AI. So AI is really, increasing the speed of how work gets done in organizations. I think finance departments are looking at even more strategic ways to be leaner, right? And pay less for resources, and resources include humans. And again, so when you think about operational change, policies, procedures, practices, technology, huge, big bodies of work there that are all about being more efficient, more lean, and fast. And then you have people. And to your point, we've just come through working in a world where there was this sort of feeling around, diversity and talent, and we've got to go after people and pay people stupid amounts of money. And what's my equity package and what's my bonus? And people had, and some people still do, but a lot of people had the luxury of multiple offers and all of these different things, to now where it's like, you really don't know, the organization you work for. You almost don't know whether or not you love remote or hybrid. There's a lot of fear within organizations. People are super concerned about being laid off. And then there is, to your point, people who are feeling emboldened. I'm not going to work somewhere where I don't have XYZ. So all of that's going on in the people space. It's the first time, I believe, in my career that all of this flux in all three categories are all happening at the same time. And I think for a leader, there are things I think that we should think about in sort of reality, right? Hybrid work is here, right? So whether you are going to be 5 days in the office or fully remote, having some way of understanding that even in 5 days, you're going to have those people that are trying to negotiate some hybrid work situation because they are fixated on it. So how do you think as a leader, what your sort of opportunities are there? Digital transformation is here to stay, right? We've got to figure out as leaders how, if we're not the ones that are actually in charge of driving that within organizations, how do we bring that within our teams? And, oh, by the way, despite all the changes that are happening, with, government changes and so on and so forth, global teams are here to stay. Most organizations are functioning in some global capacity.
Correct.
I'm coaching a startup now, leader, and he has majority of his people in San Francisco, and his only other team is based out of India. That's global, right? That's not just 2 locations. That's a global team. So global teams are here to stay. The sort of command and control leadership style that's come in now. it's something that we've been trying to run away. And even though organizations are trying to take it on, it's really not what's going to get us through this time.
No,
when you've got that much change, that much flux, that style is not going to work.
Yeah.
It's just not. And I know that there is this perception that, especially when you're seeing it in certain aspects of the government, that, that sort of, let me stoke fear in people and fear will make them do what I want is not going to work.
Yeah.
All it's going to do is have people reject you, have you build, poor products, organ rejection, people will leave and it won't work. So it's a very outdated and obsolete mentality in a way in which you think will lead people. So, clinging to rigid structures, micromanagement, and outdated management techniques, just because you see people doing it, or in some respects you're feeling it, will not work.
Yeah. And that will lead to your burnout as a leader.
100%.
And also creates, we see this here as well, creates a ton of bottlenecks. If you're, as a leader, trying to gain some stability by, controlling, but if everything needs to come through you, that's what it ends up happening, is that your people have lost their autonomy. So we know the negative impact that creates. But also you're then the one that's always approving things or signing things off or having to be in every meeting before a decision is made. That slows stuff down. It's actually an illusion of being able to control. It's actually exhausts you and frustrates people. And like you said, they leave. Or they give you the bare minimum. So yeah.
And I think again, just think about working somewhere where you've had full autonomy and now all of a sudden you don't.
Yeah.
Right. And I can imagine if you're like a VP reporting into a C-suite and you feel less autonomy, you may feel that you then need to push that down. And take away someone else's ability to make decisions. And again, the ripple effect of that is not going to yield what you want. And you will, again, have organ rejection, which is what we don't want.
So what would you say is that first sort of shift or that call to action then from leaders, if it's from working in a more controlled way to what?
I think that's what we are going to dive. I think that's what's going to sort of, let's dive into like what the three biggest leadership shifts are that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
So the first one, I think, is this notion of going from control to influence. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, sure. I think, it's just an old school way of thinking of, like I've just mentioned here, the illusion of being able to control people, but rather under these circumstances. Now you've got talent, you've got people who have ideas and whatever. I would actually ask leaders to reflect and say, like, where in my current work am I hoping that control gives me some stability, but actually I need to move into being a bit more flexible and adaptable and be able to influence in a subtler, more strategic way. So not just demanding and controlling and setting directives, but setting the vision, giving a purpose, giving a longer term strategy for people so that they don't feel controlled. I think that's the one shift, from control to being able to influence in a subtler but more careful way, rather than it's just my word, but rather what are the conditions I've created for my people to flourish? That's actually how I'm going to be able to get the work done, rather than what am I going to say? I think that's the first.
Yeah, I just want to, but I do want to like sort of double click. Like, if you went one level deeper to describe what control looks like, what would you say? Like, what's a good example for leaders who are out there wondering if they are controlling?
I mean, one thing could just be about decisions that are made. What kinds of decisions do you allow your people to make? Mm-hmm. Did you hire somebody to lead something Yet when they come up with, hey, this is my plan and I'm going to run it this way, how much of the time are you overriding that decision or demanding a lot of evidence from them before they can proceed? I think that's an example of controlling, like, how the work is done, and are you the one who's kind of saying yes or no, or this is how I want you to proceed, rather than, yes, I have a high level overview and you can feed back up to me key points, key sort of bottlenecks or times when you need my oversight because of my position. But otherwise, I need to be informed, but I'm trusting you to proceed in a way, I hired you to do that. I know you have the skills and the talent to do it. So I think decision-making is the one quick way.
Yeah, I would go even a little bit further that I think that there are leaders that are reverting back to tracking hours. How many active hours are people working? Am I able to Slack people whether they're in the office or not and they respond?
Right.
There is this mentality out there of keeping people in, quote unquote, in line. And when you think about that need to track hours, approve every little thing that comes across someone's desk, keeping people in line, whatever that means, it's literally almost impossible when you're in a remote or hybrid situation.
Yeah.
Which is why I think there is this feeling or desire for a lot of leaders to pull people back into the office so they can see them. Working.
Yeah.
And again, I remember the shift in when we started to try to move away from this sort of mentality of, if I see them, therefore they are doing. I think that there's a push that's coming back, or you're seeing this pull of this coming back. Yeah. And I think what we need to be doing is thinking about, how do we maintain some understanding of what everyone is doing? How do we sort of set deliverables so that we know what everyone is doing, right? Based on timelines and deliverables.
Yeah.
And we use that as a means of recognizing whether or not people are contributing to the work.
Right.
But I think, again, you're starting to hear, we've got to keep people in line. I think that another one I would just add is that, leaders need to shift from being bosses. That word boss is coming back, right? Who's your boss?
Oh,
I'm the boss. He's your boss. And I just think that word boss is so loaded. And again, I know it's this notion of like, let's go back to telling versus asking, right? There used to be this whole thing in leadership, and there's a whole history around it, where leadership was all about the person who was telling and directing versus the person who was asking, what do you think we should do? And again, we talked about on this podcast in a number of ways, how do you actually determine or look at the person sitting in front of you and determine what that person needs? Maybe you are sitting in front of someone who needs to be told.
Sure.
And then maybe you're sitting in front of somebody who's really good, and all they need is for you to sort of ask them or coach them or facilitate for them.
Yeah.
And again, you have to determine, what you need to do there. If you take the mentality, nope, I only have one leadership style, I'm going to tell everybody what to do, you will run the risk of losing out on some of the things that we talked about earlier.
And I would also say, you're probably not having a very nice time.
No.
And that's not how leadership has to be. I think you're probably exhausted and frustrated and annoyed and constantly like, and part of what you're getting from your people, you've created.
Yeah.
If you keep on telling people what to do, guess what? They start sitting back and going, okay, well, I've got my 4:00 meeting. I'll be told what to do in the 4:00 meeting. They're not doing anything at 3, are they?
That's right.
And then you're like, why the hell aren't they working? And then, and like, you friggin' created that, buddy.
That's right.
Well done.
Do you want to talk about strategy first to people first?
Yeah, sure. I think this the second big shift we see from strategy first to people first is maybe I would say something that as lead, and you said this in the beginning here, Allison, I think it's not like we're moving drastically to let's go back to people first. And we're still working in an organization or a business. Like, we get it.
That's
This
right.
isn't a youth club or a church where we just caring about hearts and minds. It's business. But from strategy, I think from the type of leader who is over-focused on relying on the data and the business and the process and the whatever, and this is how we're going to go, almost not looking up and seeing, what role do my people play in this? Are they bought in?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Have I heard their voices? So maybe it's kind of like, again, it's an integration of it. Sure, still be focused on your strategy. God knows you better be delivering on that, or else what the hell are you doing as a leader? But it's not going to happen without an integration of who your people are, what their skills are, whether they feel bought in. It's like, how do you move towards that? So it's not just we're not doing a flippant like, oh, care about your people and ask them what they think. And somebody's going, well, how the hell am I supposed to still execute? No, it's a little bit of both, but people will not respond if they are just given a strategy and the plan and told go.
I think the other way I would just, I think plus on what you just said, and the other thing I would say is that I think that organizations feel like they now need to pull these things apart.
Yeah, no,
and
nice.
We've been so focused on people, we haven't been focused on the strategy.
Yeah.
Well, I would actually say that's kind of your problem, right? Because again, if I don't know when it happened that these supposed companies felt like they were focused on people so much and not the strategy, but you know, the way in which I just try to oversimplify it for leaders is going back to our 3 circles. You know, you've got the business, which is the what. So what are we trying to do? What are we trying to build? Where are we trying to go? Why are we trying to do that? You know, what's happening with our organization? That's the what, right? The operations is the how. How are we going to do the what? How are we going to do it? What processes, technologies, procedures, policies are we going to put in place to do the what? And then the big piece of that, not a bigger circle, just a big piece of it is the people, right? You need the people to do the what and the how.
Yeah.
You just do. And if you don't figure out a way to have people around you or in your organization who can actually connect the dots on all of those things, you will feel like you've only been working on the people part and you haven't been doing anything on the what and the how, because you've been told that you have to focus on people.
Yeah.
If you think about what and how and who, those 3 things come together. The who, those people that are still there, whether it's 5 people or 5,000 people or 500,000 people, you have to figure out a way as a leader to connect them to the what and the how.
Yeah.
That means that you need to have engagement and motivation and clarity so that they can understand what they're supposed to be doing. Simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, and when I hear a leader go, oh, I've been so focused on people and I haven't been focused on strategy, I just go, that's kind of your problem.
Yeah.
That's not your people's problem. That's your problem.
And then I want to say,
sorry, go ahead.
Finish what you were saying.
No,
then you want to say, okay, don't focus on people. Good luck. Let me know how that goes.
Right. To think that I'm not going to focus on people means the what and the how doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's just not smart. So you have to have emotional intelligence. You have to have empathy. You have to have active listening.
Yeah.
These are not soft skills.
No.
And I know a lot of folks think they are, but they're not. They're essential leadership capabilities.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get your people to focus on the what and how, you will fail as a leader.
Correct. Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
They're not separated. They are connected.
Yeah.
Which means you have to make space for real conversations. You have to give them real feedback. You have to get them focused on the right things. And you will not be able to do that if they don't believe that you have their best interests at heart.
And I would say what you've just shared, and thank you for talking us through those three circles of business, operations, and people. I think is also the shift from, if you think of like maybe, I don't know, 60, 70 years ago, wasn't business simpler because it was just put the people in the factory and they run the conveyor belt and they go home and it's nice and easy. So the shift is towards a sophistication of leadership. We get becoming more sophisticated in understanding how to do all of this. So if you're stuck old school, it's probably because you're just thinking business or maybe business and operations, and you haven't quite gotten to that people part to be able to integrate it. And this is what we're saying. These shifts are, it's this integrated approach now, which requires more from you, hence emotional intelligence not being a soft skill. That's a tough, hard one to be able to do that in an integrated way, in a way that feels really natural and authentic to you. But it requires some work. You can't just sit in your office and write the plan and then email it. Well, you can, but again, good luck. Good luck with that one. Okay, the third shift I would also see is from leaders expecting to be able to hold some stability within the organization, or to know this is how things are done. This is who our, these are our clients. These are the needs. From stability to being able to adapt constantly, to having a mindset of like, I'm not just adapting because something happened. It's the norm. It's the norm now. Of course I'm adaptable. Of course I'm flexible in my thinking. Of course I'm always looking for, we've got a plan, but that changed there, or my people changed, or the business changed, or the market looks different. And not to be frustrated by that. Not to be like, oh God, why can't we just run it the way we always have? And I would say that shift is really, I think it starts internally, Allison. The shift needs to change from a leader being able to say, it's not normal anymore that there won't be some upheaval or adapting required in my role right now, in this organization, and to make that okay. Because if you are still fighting that, if still every day you're like, oh, I can't believe we've just got new direction about this and that's changed, or suddenly the laws changed here, or the budget got shifted, you're going to give yourself an ulcer or something. So that first shift is like open-mindedness and like, okay, I have the skills to be able to move my way through this. There was a 2020 study that McKinsey did that found that in companies, leaders who had these extreme adaptability skills were 2.3 times more likely to outperform their peers. So what do you think about this, the more adaptability? What are those? Do you have concrete examples of what it really means to be more adaptable as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, there are tons of concrete examples, but I think I just want to double down on what it's going to take you to be more adaptable, right? I think that leaders are going to have to place themselves into a position and mindset of continuous learning. And I know that feels exhausting, right? And I know we sit on this podcast and we're like, you're going to have to be mindset of continuous learning, stay curious and be flexible, embrace uncertainty. You're like, I'm exhausted. Well, I think that, yes, you're exhausted and change is not going to stop coming at you.
Yeah.
So a way in which you can manage yourself and your well-being is to never get stuck in something as firm and keep yourself extremely flexible so that you can then take what is coming at you and translate it for your team.
Yeah.
If you close yourself off and, because you're exhausted or you're tired, you will not hear something. And the way that you will translate it to your team will not be right. And then that will cause problems for you.
Yeah,
So if you can figure out ways to re-energize yourself, to stay curious, almost expecting something to change, right? And creating some flexibility in the way that you work and the way that you work with your team. You will keep your team malleable so that when something is coming down, it's almost as if you can absorb it. And keep things moving. And this takes practice. So I don't want us to be saying these words and it sounds like, oh, well, that's all I got to do is stay curious. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you're going to have to place yourself as a leader in this state of being almost like what's about to happen. Not paranoid, just what's about to happen, or talking to your leader. Okay, anything coming down the pike, or are you hearing about anything? Is there anything I should probably shift focus around?
No, that's not.
Versus, again, moving from this notion of this fixed plan. It's gone away. So that, I mean, there are, again, tons of examples, but I just wanted to sort of throw that in there.
Well, I think it would show up again if we come back to your 3 circles of strategy there with the business, operational, and people. I think an adaptable leader, you will see evidence of that in those 3 areas. So as you've just described, yes, I may have a strategy, but around business-wise, am I even anticipating perhaps 2 options depending on, I don't know, we're waiting for some direction from the IRS about how we do payroll. We haven't got the answers yet. So let's just be ready so that when that direction drops, I've got 2 options there. And operationally, this is how I work with my team. I'm always talking to them about, let's wait until, I've checked with legal counsel and I've got this meeting, but we'll be ready to roll either direction depending on what we hear. Those, the processes to deliver on that strategy, there's adaptability built into that as well. So it's not just that, in my mind, I'm like, oh, cool, this is okay. They've just changed this thing. But rather, I'm actually set up. I think about it. I communicate about it. We have processes set up to respond to this. That's actually an indicator of a leader who is adaptable, rather than, shit, I didn't think that through. Now we got to respond. Well, your job is to always anticipate that there will be 3 or 4 crises. So build that in.
So let's dive into the actual, how do leaders adapt and thrive in this environment, right? So let's go through these. It won't be a surprise that the first one is build trust and psychological safety. I mean, we talk about it all the time. So if your team doesn't feel psychologically safe to share their own ideas, to make mistakes, to challenge the status quo, to help you foresee something that might be coming down the pike, to be able to get into that change with you and see options. I'm just going to put it, quite frank, you're not leading, you're managing. If your team does not feel safe to share ideas, make mistakes, or challenge the status quo, you are not leading, you are managing. And there is a difference. Dean, do you want to take the next one?
Yes. And I also just want to add, if it's not even that your team doesn't feel safe to share ideas, but part of you is like, I hope they don't give me any ideas because I've got the idea and this is what I want. That's also you're managing there.
Good example. Really good.
I think a second one is to be able to, especially helps with our adaptability, is to be able to lead your people by giving them clarity rather than thinking I have to give them a certainty or have all the answers. And that's a tough one, I think, especially if you're a leader who has maybe a lot of expertise or some, a depth of technical knowledge, that to be in a space of, we don't know right now, to use that early example, the IRS hasn't given us the direction on this deferred tax process and my team's working in compliance, I can't tell them what to do. I don't have that certainty. What, I must make it up for them? No. But to still be able to say, this is what I have set in place. This is how we're working as a team, or this is who I've spoken to, and this is how we're tracking, and this is how we'll be ready. So you're still communicating action, you're still communicating this is how we will respond, but you don't have to give that answer. And the simplest way I can describe this, and it comes from my earlier working days. After I was a teacher, I ended up working in a call center, a customer contact center. Remember when everything was a call center in 2000? But in working on customer service there, so inbound lines, what was the first lesson we learned is that if you need to put somebody on hold, they've inquired about something and you're waiting for an answer, you don't just leave them on hold. You keep on coming back and say, thank you so much for waiting. I'm going to process that as soon as possible. I'll be back in 30 seconds. And you come back again, and you come back again. Whether you have to tell them 10 times or not, thank you, I'm coming, it's coming. You're still giving them certainty of, I'm with you, even if you don't have the answer. And we know that too. You've got a problem with a bank. You just want somebody to phone back and say, we don't have the answer here, but hey, we're on this. So I don't want leaders to ever be the equivalent of put your people in a call center on hold, put them on hold for a month and go, well, we haven't been told that yet. Communicate what you do know, say what you don't know, explain how operationally you are ready to respond once you actually have that clarity.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole podcast on leaders feeling as though they need to have all the answers. I think because I think this is a bit of a mentality that's out there.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, just sometimes just saying I don't have all the answers yet.
Yeah.
But let's figure out what we do know and what we don't know and what we need answers to, and we'll just we'll figure it out together. And there's something about that transparency that I think a lot of leaders struggle with. But it is definitely second in terms of this list, leading with clarity and not certainty. What do you think about this notion of asynchronous communication? Mastering it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a powerful skill or an approach for a leader to adopt. If we think about asynchronous, that means not everybody is together all the time, synchronous. So are you over relying on, we've got our Zoom call on Friday morning, and that's when I'll be able to tell everybody X, Y, and Z. Sure, still have your Zoom call, but we don't always need everybody together. And I appreciate that sometimes the intention behind that is, I don't want to tell some people before others, or will it seem like they're favorites, or will I forget the way in which I said at the Friday meeting might be different than if I have a one-to-one. You got to get over that, get past that, and just see what are some other methods. And of course, if you're listening, you're like, sure, I don't just wait for a Zoom call, Dean. But there are lots of additional ways of whether it's a little voice note that you're sending to people, or really making sure that how things are documented. Can people get hold of information from you or your communication? Is there a consistency that people can say, oh, there's almost like a whole range of ways in which I can get to my manager. There's a range of ways in which my manager gets to me. It's not just like, now we got to wait for the town hall in 2 weeks. What can I still drip feed to people, whether it's, through instant messaging type things, or the meetings, or the communication that are emailed or whatever. What did I miss?
Yeah, I would say, the only thing I would add, and I would just say a little bit more harsh, I think is, if you're still stuck in a meeting heavy, must be online 9 to 5 mentality, you're killing the productivity of yourself and your team. And trust me, this is somebody who actually lived like that. And I would even say, sharing things through clear documentation, voice notes, using tools like whether or not you have Slack or not, or Notion. Not everything needs to be on a Zoom call, and not everything needs to be you saying it to people. So the fourth one I would add is focus on outcomes and not hours. Do you want to take this one, Dean?
Yeah, sure. Well, also, I think in our last podcast, though, we were talking about like focus on progress, reward progress, recognize progress. So I would say like focus on progress and outcomes rather than watching the clock. And that's what you've spoken to. If I am inadvertently favoring somebody because I think, wow, he really works late.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Acknowledge that. That might still be something for you to have a look at, like, how come this guy's working late? But to actually see what's beneath that. Am I still seeing progress from this person? Are they achieving what I've set out for them to achieve, more than just, well, I'm sort of bamboozled by, or I'm seduced by the super hours that somebody's working, rather than, and I'm not actually looking beneath that level or that beneath the surface to actually see the effort, the progress, the outcomes that have been achieved. And in a way, then it shouldn't matter what the hours are. Don't look at the clock. I mean, sure, maybe we contracted to work a certain number of hours, but if that's your primary lever that you are pulling to be able to say whether somebody's good or bad, or whether they're a hard worker or not, we're missing a trick. We actually need to understand their work.
Yeah, and I think I know I'm biased, and I know I get a lot of I get dragged a little bit on my days of McKinsey, especially today. But I still think, professional services organizations, and even to some extent financial services organizations, just got this right. They just set a bar of what they expect people to do. They're giving that sort of expectation. And no one's sitting there, tracking whether or not they came in at 9 and left at 5. Yeah. It's really about what did you produce? And if you produced it fast, can you do more? Yeah. And so I just want to double down on, just because you see someone sitting at a desk for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, it does not mean that the work that they're doing is stellar and what you even asked for or what you even need to get work done. It could be that person that you are managing remotely, who you can't see, that's actually turning around the work faster, better, more improved, is someone who is actually giving you exactly what you need. And you have no idea how many hours they worked. Yeah. Maybe they worked 4 and maybe they worked 40. Who knows? Yeah. So I think if you're so focused on hours, you really need to check that, because it's just not smart. It's not a smart way to manage people these days. Yeah.
I'd like to think about it in terms of like a value to effort ratio. Yeah. Like how much, what are the results and how much effort did you need to put in there? So, let's just move away from assuming that working a certain number of hours means anything. On its own, it means very little in terms of whether they're a productive worker or not. Still something to look at. I want to know, why am I not seeing somebody in the office a lot? But that just means we've got to dig a bit deeper. Or why is she staying so long? That doesn't mean anything other than I need to figure out why she's staying so long.
Yeah. Another way of also just saying that is like results over rigid rules. Yeah. That is really the true future of leadership today, because you got change coming at you, lots of things moving, and you're focused on hours. It's like, are you kidding me right now? It's just not. It's just not smart. Yeah. All right, so let's sort of wrap this up. There's I just want to sort of reinforce what we've talked about. There are things that you need to do right now or learn how to do. The very first one is embrace trust and autonomy. So please, for the love of God, let go of micromanagement and being the one that has to tell everybody everything to do. and the one that has to hold all of the answers while you have these brilliant, amazing people around you, and deeper within your organization if you have a big organization. So embrace trust and autonomy. Develop emotional intelligence. You guys have heard me talk about this. I will not drop it.
No.
Your ability to be self-aware, socially aware, and connected to the people who are around you is just smart. And so people first. I know when you hear that, you're separating it from the three circles, but that is not what that means. It just means if you understand the what and how, which is going to be constantly changing, your who may not change that much, but your what and how is constantly changing. You need to have the ability as the leader to adapt to that person sitting in front of you who you now need to get connected to the what and how that's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So you have to have a little bit of people first. Stay adaptable and open to change. Again, we talked about this notion of like staying in that sort of space of continuous learning. How do you make sure that you are open and adaptable and malleable on your team so that when all of these things are coming at you, you can evolve and you don't fall behind.
Yeah.
Because you as the leader will be responsible for getting that group of people to do whatever is expected. Communicate with clarity and prioritize asynchronous communication. So do not hold all the cards. Do not wait for a meeting to share. Look for ways through, again, Slack, Notion, whatever kind of communication tool to share out information for people. We talked about this before. Not everybody takes in information the same way, right? Some people visually need to see it. Some people need to hear it. And some people need to read. And then there are other ways in which people take in information, even outside of those three that I just mentioned. So as a leader, you need to think about what are the multiple ways in which I can get things out, and to really make sure that when you're communicating or in those conversations, it's really meaningful.
Yeah.
And last but not least, measure outcomes, not hours. And that one, I just don't get. I still don't get it. I've been working for over 20 years. I still don't get leaders who look at hours. It just does not make any sense to me. Dean, anything you would sort of say about those five, or anything you want to add there?
No, I just think you summarized them beautifully, as you often do here. And want to encourage our leaders who are listening, who've been with us through this whole season, because we know you do care about what it feels like to be you, what it feels like to be led by you, and you care about the kind of work that you do, your expertise, and the organization you're working in. So you're here because you're putting in the effort. So again, I'm like super encouraging and want to say thank you for that. And I really trust that of these things we've shared with you, whilst things have been changing, there might be a new little insight for you that you say, oh, there's something else that I might still be able to refine. Where am I seeking stability where maybe some flexibility is required? Where am I maybe pushing a little bit hard on execution and I need to incorporate a little bit more about my people there? Where can I focus a little bit more about my own mindset, because it's showing up in how I'm judging or assessing people based on what I'm seeing, the number of hours they're working, whatever. So trust that there's something powerful in there that you can apply, that you can continue to refine in your own leadership. So thank you. Keep going. We need a more human approach to leadership here today, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I would add is that leadership is changing and we're all learning. I mean, Dean and I are learning. I think the good news is that we've worked long enough to see the ebbs and flows in organizations and have seen, even though this time I think is super scary for people, I don't know why, I sit in complete comfort that I actually know as a leader how to adapt to this time. And that is what we're sharing with you. We are absolutely here to help you navigate a lot of this change with confidence. A lot of us, we not only have this podcast, but we have our coaching businesses. We have tools that we're going to be creating and can create. So connect with us on LinkedIn, connect with us, around this podcast, reach out. The one thing I love about Dean and I, not just together, is we are people first. I think we have always been people first. We do think about the people that we are working with and trying to help them, get through change with confidence. So keep leading, keep growing, rewire your leadership for the future because it's needed. And just know that we are here for you. So if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and please leave us a review because we love feedback. And, until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Dean.